Across our military, our bases and ports are using more solar and wind, which helps save money that we can use to improve readiness. The Army is pursuing new, lighter, more fuel-efficient vehicles. The Air Force F-22 broke the sound barrier using biofuels. And the Navy runs an entire carrier strike group, the Green Fleet, with biofuels. Our Marines have deployed to Afghanistan with portable solar panels, lightening their load and reducing dangerous resupply missions. So fighting climate change and using energy wisely also makes our forces more nimble and more ready, and that's something that should unite us as Americans. When storms gather, we get ready.
Hello, dear listeners, friends, comrades, subjects, citizens, insurgents, fugitives, defectors, dissidents, even the haters and losers. Welcome to Turbulence. My name is Dylan Saba, and I'm here with my co-host Seamus Melikafzeli and our producer, M. Siniza. We're recording from New York City, the center of a world empire that is dying, but so far from dead. From our vantage point here, about a quarter of the way through the 21st century, things feel a little bit apocalyptic. As a 90s baby, I was told that things would be much better by now. History was over, the long arc of history was bending towards justice, and once we got out of the Bush years, we'd be able to tackle humanity's common problems, namely climate change. But somehow, the Bush years never really ended. And the idea of the world's nations setting aside geopolitical conflict to meet climate targets is now laughable.
I mean, I am also a 90s baby. Admittedly, I was born in 99. But Al Gore was a shockingly major part of my childhood, despite him not being vice president anymore. How big was An Inconvenient Truth on your radar as a kid? Was it on your radar?
Absolutely was on my radar. In fact, Al Gore was very much on my radar as the source of one of my first political memories whatsoever, which was watching the debates in the lead up to the 2000 election, where Al Gore famously claimed that A, that he invented the internet, and B, that the internet was defined as a series of tubes, which everyone laughed at the time, but I think is basically true. But anyways, Al Gore was very prominent in my youth, and the movie was very prominent, both in its original form and then in the subsequent South Park version, Man Bear Pig, which was a seminal television episode of my youth.
Yeah, just as a side note, a lot of the South Park creators' political analyses have not really held up. The dismissal of climate change in the famous Man Bear Pig episode, they denied that secondhand smoke was deadly. The whole crux of Team America World Police was that America blows up a lot of things and kills a lot of people, but ultimately overthrowing Saddam Hussein was worth it and a good thing. Aside from all of that, Al Gore was a very prominent part of both of our childhoods, and climate change he was the symbol of liberal advocacy for this cause. He did the movie, he was on 30 Rock, he was on all kinds of different television shows promoting climate change throughout the years. And when the Paris Accords were signed in the late 2010s, he was there. It was the culmination of all of the work that he did. And ultimately, it does not seem to have been for anything, unfortunately.
Yeah, I remember being imbued with this grand generational responsibility, in part by watching the graph that Al Gore presents where the line of emissions shoots all the way up into the ceiling. And
no. There was the trailer where there was the hottest year on record was 2005. It's oh my God.
Right.
Oh, it was going to get a lot worse. Yeah.
It was bestowed upon us that once we ended the war on terror, that this was going to be the generational responsibility. We were going to be able to solve climate change. And it did seem like we were building in that direction. But now, 20 years on from that moment, we haven't really gotten very far. instead of being in the midst of some green transition, we've got basically a pretty deflated climate movement that picked up some real momentum through the back half of the 2010s, but seems to have largely petered out. And we have a fossil fuel industry now that's sitting quite pretty. The Inflation Reduction Act, which was the marquee piece of domestic legislation of the Biden administration, was nominally a climate bill, but it was already on its face quite weak in terms of its regulations and restrictions and quite business friendly. And even that has been summarily dismantled in the second Trump administration. And no one in politics really is making any serious noise about doing much else. In the back half of the 2010s, we heard a lot about the Green New Deal. That was kind of the marquee domestic policy that, progressive superstar legislators such as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was swept into office on. It seems to have mostly fallen out of the discourse, and the capitalist class has effectively decided that the ship has basically sailed on curtailing emissions. Where does that leave us, Seamus?
Leaves us in a really bad spot. I mean, I remember this climate movement that you're talking about. It built up rhetorically, and it's been memory hold, but in the late 2000s, early 2010s, before this stuff got polarized, there were a lot of Republicans. I remember there was an ad, I believe, featuring Nancy Pelosi and Newt Gingrich, both side by side. And they were saying, I'm a Democrat, you're a Republican, but we both believe in the necessity of combating climate change. It was supposed to be this big, momentous, this is a bipartisan thing, saving the earth. Senator Lindsey Graham was also one of those people who triumphed on the idea of being this bipartisan climate change advocate. Now he barely talks about it. He's much more concerned with obliterating Iran, conquering Greenland, and everything else Trump wants. But I mean, even then, this movement is building up, and obviously people want things to change, but on the legislative side, this movement towards the Green New Deal, one of the oddest defenses that I saw put forward for the Green New Deal was when AOC helped introduce it. One of the defenses was that there weren't many details to the Green New Deal. Therefore, how can you possibly oppose it on the Republican side? Because the Republicans were talking about how this was going to bulldoze the American dream and everything else alongside it. And then there were updates to it. I don't know if you remember Ed Markey when he was a more prominent figure, but he introduced a more overhauled idea of the Green New Deal. And even then, when you read through it, there were lots of proposals to increase goals, overhaul certain things, meet emission mandates, a lot of buzzwords, but virtually no specifics on how to get there. This was all supposed to be something that would be obviously handled by the incoming Bernie Sanders administration. And now that that has completely petered out and Bernie Sanders is persona non grata to a lot of former left-wing supporters of his, that leaves nobody to care about any of this, because the Republicans are wholly focused on destroying the earth militarily, and Democrats are focused on bringing everything back to pre-2016, in which there was also no movement on this issue. God, all of this stuff is flooding back to me now. I do remember alongside the Green New Deal talk, there was discussion, I think from Elizabeth Warren, as well as Barack Obama, about the military being part of the Green New Deal, that the military could be part of this big environmental push, that the military could be made into this environmentally friendly enterprise. And that was not the major aspect of it, but it was part of what was being sold alongside it, that can make it palatable to people who are otherwise extraordinarily supportive of American imperialism, but maybe they needed to be convinced that they could be a little bit more green. It was all very strange and I think a bit foreboding about the seriousness of that project.
Yeah, and it also just became this label to slap on a whole host of socialist, quasi-socialist, left liberal policies. It was basically a vibe. They were like, okay, and also Medicare for all is part of the Green New Deal, and our housing program is part of the Green New Deal, and we're just going to do a New Deal, and we're going to call it green. And that means that it's going to actually address all of the emissions-related requirements of not exceeding global temperatures beyond 2 degrees Celsius or 2.5 degrees Celsius. And because there was no real specific engagement in terms of, well, what does it actually take? How would it actually affect our levels of consumption? How would we actually navigate the fact that you have business union interests who are going to be fundamentally opposed to some of the real demands that would need to be in place from an environmentalist point of view to actually achieve this as a comprehensive project where we are actually stopping climate change? And yeah, you're right. Like all of that was supposed to be just kind of figured out in the administration once we got mass political buy-in. But that didn't work. And then we had Trump and then Biden and then Trump again. And all of a sudden, we're looking at 8 to 12 years later at the most critical point in actually meaningfully addressing emissions. And so now we're a full decade behind. Nothing has actually progressed. And the situation is far worse. And now
I should say, just in our defense, in the American defense, this seems to have been a much more widespread Western phenomenon of, okay, we need more green policies. This is the most important issue that is affecting our time. We need to do something big and significant. All of these countries, I mean, almost every single country in the world signs onto the Paris Accords, enforcing for themselves all of these individual goals that they need to reach, but there is no enforcement mechanism on these things. So that means that America pulls out, it goes back in, and there doesn't seem to be any meaningful direction, except for right now, I should say. I mean, the EPA was being gutted under the Trump administration, and now it's really being gutted under this administration. But in Germany, there has been this whole thing where the Greens got into power, and then they realized that meeting environmental goals was too difficult, and they basically stopped caring about it. The Greens, it's in the name of the party, and they just stopped. It became a non-issue. And also the relevance of that issue to the German public also dropped when there was a realization that their societies would have to fundamentally change how they consumed. This was unthinkable. Everybody was willing to do severe work, but only if it didn't result in any sort of changes to their lifestyles or their quality of life or anything.
I mean, this is the problem of climate, right? Is that it is a mega problem that...
It's the whole thing.
It's the whole thing. It's the whole thing. And you require, to actually solve it, you require massive concessions from all kinds of stakeholders that no one political party or figure can actually coerce. This is why the people who are serious about climate are like, well, okay, the only thing that's going to actually work is we need some kind of climate Napoleon or climate Mao or something. Someone who's willing to just take the reins of power and do what needs to be done. Because the problem is you can't actually get buy-in from the relevant stakeholders because capital is not going to do it. They want to keep making money. Those are the main stakeholders, obviously, but also consumers don't want to do it. They don't want to restrict consumption as well. And so you have a situation in which people and political movements and parties are using the concept of ameliorating climate change in order to capture that audience or sell the policies, but the policies are just the things that they wanted to do anyways. So when it came to the left, you had dressing up all of the left-wing social democratic parties under the label of the Green New Deal or just slapping green on them and saying, okay, yeah, these things that we already wanted to do are going to be green. And now, under the Trump administration, also really under Biden, but certainly under Trump, is you have the imperialist version of that. And this was really key in the Biden years where they talk about their climate objectives, but it's all through the language of grand great power competition with China. It's all about shoring up supply lines for key resources. It's all about beating China in terms of green energy. Of course, the actual goal of reducing emissions falls fully out of the picture, and it just becomes about conquering the new energy spaces of the world that's to come.
As soon as you talked about the great power stuff, I remembered this insane thing. One of the major economic mandates of the Biden administration was pushing for more adoption of electric cars, which admittedly, that's a good idea. But part of that, China is making these great EVs. People in Europe know this. People in Asia surely know this. They're much better than Teslas because Teslas are a dog shit car company. And these things are set to enter the American market in a really big way. They're going to revolutionize this field. So what does the Biden administration do? Where something that is cheaper than most EVs is going to enter the market, which will undoubtedly lead to the wide-scale adoption of these things once they are available to American consumers. He does a crackdown on the EVs, sweeping bans on these car companies, like the software and the hardware that is required to put these cars on the road. I remember also him touting this publicly as if this was like a huge win for American consumers. The American companies aren't doing this. The cars are still too expensive. They aren't good. And China is promising a much better product. And it's like, nope, we can't do it. 100% tariff on EVs. 25% tariff on lithium batteries, 50% tariff, 70%, just all of these different things.
As Democratic Party pollster wonder kid, golden boy, friend of the pod, David Shore famously tweeted, "I'd rather live in a world with 4 degrees increase in global temperatures than see China be the global hegemon." That's not,
you're going to get both, buddy.
Ideology. Yeah, right. That is the
Christ.
ideology. In this world where the only real language of climate that's being spoken, or the only people in a real position of power who seem to be taking climate change seriously, are those people involved in the competition, the people in the military-industrial complex. Why? Because they view it as an opportunity. In preparing for this episode, I read this very interesting piece by Sofia Menemenlis titled "The Sunlight Managers" in the publication The Breakdown. And the piece is about something called solar radiation modification, which is an attempt to thwart climate change, not by reducing emissions, meeting climate targets, what have you, but by injecting small reflective particles into the upper atmosphere en masse to reflect away radiation from the sun. This idea apparently came from volcanoes. If they erupt with enough force, they can spray so much sulfur into the atmosphere that it temporarily achieves a global cooling effect. So even though most researchers who study this thing have warned against its implementation, considering they don't really know what kinds of downsides would come with literally controlling the weather, that has not stopped startups like the US-Israeli corporation Stardust Solutions from raising millions of venture capital dollars for just this purpose. So perhaps unsurprisingly, this plan would be to deploy this geoengineering project via the military. And I'm going to quote from the piece here. "As implied by the cost analysis studies that count the number of F-15 flights needed to spread sulfate across the globe, serious efforts to lower the Earth's temperature would likely be militarized. Given the logistical requirements of SRM, the strategic implications of controlling global weather, and the United States' interest in dominating global aerospace in partnership with Silicon Valley and military contractors, it is no surprise that the topic continues to draw interest from military-industrial actors. Stardust Solutions, for instance, is primarily funded by AWZ Ventures, a Canadian venture capital firm that specializes in Israeli military and surveillance technology, and which is managed by former executives from the CIA, FBI, MIS, Mossad, Shin Bet, and Unit 8200, an Israeli intelligence core unit. This is a parenthetical. Stardust Solutions asserts they have no connection to the Israeli military.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. Stardust Solutions is also developing proprietary deployment technology, like specially engineered aerosol particles and a dispersion system that can, according to a report they commissioned, be mounted on aircraft. While assuming private ownership of the means of managing the atmosphere, they anticipate the decisions about SRM will be made by governments, quote, under U.S. leadership.
Oh, God, man. The Israeli startup nation stuff has been unbelievably awful for the world. God damn. No benefits. What do they make? Ways?
Yeah, which also is like surveillance, also is like connected to
surveillance.
Like the only thing, a classic Israeli, like a bajillion startups, and the only thing they do is spy in various different capacities. Probably even the fucking cherry tomatoes have little like transistor radios in them.
Wasn't there like that ad on Twitter for like something you could like stick in your phone and it would control the phone with AI?
Yeah. But it's just pretty horrific to see how far and how fast we have fallen over even just the last half a generation. From the grandiose visions of global cooperation around climate to, okay, well, we're going to build out green infrastructure in competition to the Chinese, to, okay, we're going to use some Israeli spy technology to shoot sulfur into the atmosphere, and that's going to be our solution. It is just a harrowing reminder of the absolutely abysmal state of things. And the fact that the military is at the center of all of this, it's even more concerning than the Democratic Party and the Republicans turning their backs while fossil corporations continue to stack up profits, because it also ties in with all of this geopolitical posturing as well. Part of what's happening now with this grand struggle and Trump making all of these claims and play over Greenland is that the military views the Arctic as a key space of competition over supply line, pathways, routes, and over resource extraction, literally because the Arctic is melting. Because we are not doing anything to address climate change, like, okay, great. This opens up all kinds of opportunities for extraction and for a grand geopolitical competition with Russia and China.
We should talk about, the main topic of this discussion, which is Earth's Greatest Enemy, the new film by Abby Martin and Mike Preisner, which of course goes over all of this. And I, of course, enjoyed the discussion that we had with the director, Abby Martin, about this. The thing that I think most shocked me in relation to the stuff about the Arctic was how Abby goes to all of these different conferences, goes to all of the stuff that is freely available to journalists, to the public. And this is not something that is being talked about behind closed doors. This is not how anti-environmentalists used to be spoken about in films in the 1990s, where they have these secret blueprints where they're going to build a fancy mall over the penguin habitat.
Right.
Like, they are fully openly talking about, like you're saying, the Arctic is going to melt. There's going to be catastrophic damage to the planet. All of the worst nightmares of Al Gore are going to be wrought upon the earth. Who knows how many people will die? Who knows how many cities will disappear? Who knows how many island nations will just evaporate off of the earth's surface? But now there's going to be a new passage that we can push ships through, and now we can do more brinksmanship with Russia. And it's just this maddening thing. And some of these people, when they're questioned by Abby, they have to do some sort of dance where it's maybe they try to justify it, but then other times they just get really mad that somebody else has tuned into this public conversation that they're having about how they're going to capitalize off of mass civilizational chaos that they are just banking is going to happen within the next... the time scales they're talking about, they're still assuming that the same diplomatic relationships with China and Russia are going to be happening, only intensified. So within 10, 20, 30 years, they're expecting these avenues to open up. And it's really horrifying and jarring to witness on screen.
Yeah, I think it really is just illustrative of this age of the end of ideology that we find ourselves in. It feels like in the 90s and 2000s, there was still this hangover from the Cold War where we had to justify things in front of the world and to our own people of being a worthwhile project to pursue and for the common interest and the spirit of humanity, because we were used to having to justify an ideological project as against the Soviets. But we're now just kind of drunk off of the decades of unipolar power where we just kind of make racial gestures at the other people in the world and don't have to sell any kind of ideological project. And now it's just, no, we're going to find the synergies and make money. and that's just it. And so if you point that out, it's more like Abby Martin is viewed as some antagonist, but also just kind of stared at as an alien. Of why would you even ask me that?
In particular, when she is at the Pacific Rim military exercises, she's around a handful of other reporters. This is not a well-documented event, despite its military significance. And these are mostly defense reporters. They're interested in the hardware that's being utilized. They're interested in the grand strategic narrative. They're interested in how the soldiers are doing on a personal level. But Abby is the only one who actually has an angle that affects everyone, talking about the environmental damage of this. And the military spokesman talking to them, you can see him trying to formulate any sort of angle in real life about how to respond to this because he genuinely hasn't thought about this. It's not a factor. He hasn't even thought about a canned phrase to use. He has to go back into his PR training. As you're saying, grand racial gestures when they have to play on something, but really they just don't care about any of this stuff. Did you see 30 Rock? Was this a show that you watched?
I was kind of vaguely aware of it, but I was not a regular consumer.
Fantastic program. But there was a side character on that show that Al Gore appeared on, Greenzo, which is a corporate invention in order to sell corporate green politics to an audience. And Greenzo eventually goes mad with power. And what I was thinking about is there used to be these environmental mascots that the corporations would put out. There used to be all of these different posters and media campaigns that U.S. governmental organizations would put out. And now all of these corporations no longer care. And also all of these organizations are just posting 8chan memes on.
Yeah.
They don't care. Like, they don't care about selling anything to children. They don't care about imprinting on anybody. All they fucking care about is like the stuff with the suicidal penguin, which they're trying to redefine into this big heroic character. I don't know if it's something you've been seeing.
Yes, I have no comments on it because it's like so crazy.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
Like this penguin is gonna die. Yeah. It's gonna die out in the fucking mountains. You just don't care. Oh God, everything's stupid. Okay. Oh, well, let's get to the discussion with Abby. But I just want to finish up by saying everything is stupid. And thank God Abby is here to bring things back around into a cogent, coherent narrative about how evil these people are and how they need to be stopped. Before we get into the conversation, we do have a pitch to you, the listener. Turbulence is entirely listener-funded. We don't run ads. We don't take money from institutions. And that independence is the foundation of this project. It only exists because of you.
Because we're committed to providing you the in-depth history and present context you need to make sense of each of these topics, these episodes take a great deal of time and effort to produce, from conception to research to editing. It's because we value your time as a listener, and because we want to produce something lasting and useful, that we think this level of effort is worth investing in. But that means we can't quite move as nimbly as we might otherwise like. So in addition to our free public episodes, we're also dropping weekly episodes behind the paywall. That's where we'll be able to respond to events as they unfold in closer to real time, providing our analysis, following up on threads and conversations from prior episodes, and drawing connections across the topics we've covered.
To do all this, we need your support. A $5 monthly subscription will give you access to the bonus feed, our Substack community, and most importantly, you'll make it possible for us to keep doing this work independently week after week. Subscribe today at turbulencepod.substack.com and follow along on Twitter and Instagram at turbulence_pod. We hope you'll join us. We are speaking today with the illustrious veteran reporter Abby Martin about her new documentary that she has made with Mike Preisner, Earth's Greatest Enemy, which has been taking a tour around the United States, sold out screenings all over the country about America's military's environmental destruction. Abby, how are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for having me on. It's amazing to be here.
So I wanted to ask about the conception of the documentary, not only that the environmental damage to the Earth done by the U.S. military is so vast, but also the issue of the negative effects on the environment specifically feel like they've been placed somewhat on the back burner as far as negative effects of U.S. imperialism go, with everything else that happens to come with America's overreach abroad. Why do you think this is, despite the severity that you talk about in the documentary?
It's a really good point. I mean, the abstraction of the environmental devastation does seem to be in the periphery. I think when people watch the documentary, they're like, it synthesizes everything that we know, but we've kind of buried. And I think it's intentional. I mean, you look at the way the system operates and the way that the propaganda is perpetuated, and it's all atomized, it's all abstracted intentionally so. So it's just separated, right? We never even understand the scope and breadth of US imperialism, let alone the intrinsic nature of how all of these issues are interconnected. The fact that as we watch a genocide and ecocide in Gaza, we all implicitly understand that this is going to impact everyone on Earth. So I think as these issues are entrenched globally and as globalization becomes more and more apparent that, in terms of BDS, it's very hard to center one perpetrator of this genocide. And I think those can be really paralyzing and overwhelming concepts, but that's why we need to address these things accordingly and try to synthesize these things ourselves and make the solutions global with that international framework. So I think that the propaganda has been amazing. I mean, it's basically told us that if we just use paper straws and recycle and drive Teslas, then we're going to be okay. And it's a huge fucking fraud and scam. And you have half the country not even believing in climate change. So that is a very, very purposeful thing that has happened as a result of the system's propaganda.
Something that I remember distinctly about the 2000s, I mean, when I was a child, admittedly, but Al Gore was the main perpetrator of, not perpetrator, maybe that's a severe word, but he was the vice president of the Clinton administration, a time when the U.S. was, as with many, overstretched abroad in many different places that it shouldn't have been. And yet he became the arbiter of climate change activism. I mean, there was the inconvenient truth. He spearheaded the Paris Accords, which has turned out to be really nothing at all, despite the vastness of that deal. I mean, you spoke about the propaganda specifically, but why do you think that people advocating left-wing critiques of this, trying to center it, why haven't they been able to? I mean, speaking frankly, this is one of the only instances in which I've actually seen a left-wing piece of, I don't know what we should call it, agitprop about this issue.
No, I think there's two really important points here. The fact that Al Gore, I mean, look at Clintonism, look at the New Democrats that Clinton's era pioneered. I mean, this was neoliberalism on steroids. This was the collapse of the Soviet Union. And after this kind of fire sale, the end of communism, Francis Fukuyama, standing in the ashes of the new capitalist model for the planet. And so everything oriented around climate change and the dogma that people like Al Gore and the neoliberal Democrats perpetuated at that time was a market-oriented approach. We want to preserve status quoism. We want to somehow not really point out the fact that we need to remove our economic system off of fossil fuel infrastructure. So obviously, when that's not the main goal and the main framework, what are we even talking about here? So it's all just been absolutely absurd rhetoric, doing nothing at all, while the oil and gas companies are dominating and shaping the narrative and global policy. So I think that's first and foremost the fact that Al Gore hoodwinked everyone, put this issue to the forefront, but then isolated it and atomized it into just environmentalism. Oh, it's just about sea levels rising. But as we know now, as we're facing down hurricanes, flooding, tens of thousands of people are dying from climate change disasters, the fires in LA, it's not just about what Al Gore painted the picture as. It's so existential now. It's all of us or none of us. I mean, I think we're seeing the writing on the wall. But in terms of why have environmental groups, why have kind of these liberal NGOs not touched this, I think it's just so obvious. The status quo of US imperialism and capitalism, you cannot get grants. You can't operate in DC. All of these people are friends with each other. It's a kind of access journalism, access grant giving. That's kind of the way that this works. And especially just trying to attempt to get funding for this documentary, I saw it firsthand. I mean, I went to Hollywood and I was trying to get mainstream liberals on board. And they told me point blank, Seamus, you're the new Al Gore. This is the new inconvenient truth. And I was just like, oh my God, that's great. So you'll help me? And they're like, oh God, no. This is way too fucking crazy. You need to talk about the good things the military does. Your Palestine stuff's really making us uncomfortable. It was so obvious the roadblocks that you're up against just talking about this issue because the military is a revered institution and it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And so it's easier to operate as the Sierra Club. And you know what? Sierra Club has been really receptive of this around the country, I will say. But look at the World Wildlife Fund. Look at a lot of these other institutions. Where are they at on this issue? You just simply cannot point to preserving the habitat or any aspect of the environment in a vacuum.
Yeah. You're talking about market-based solutions as the best the neoliberals have to offer. And I really do think that at best, we're talking about market-based solutions. And at worst, we're just talking about marketing, right?
Yeah,
What
right.
we're seeing in terms of greenwashing, right? That was a major narrative of Israel in terms of justifying itself as a nation, was leaning on greenwashing and how eco-friendly we are as a state, what have you. And then they, go on and perpetuate an ecocide in Gaza.
I just want to add on to what Dylan is saying. This literally came out just today from the IDF's Farsi division, where they have a spokesman touting the fact that water desalination has made the desert bloom in Israel, and they can give that technology to Iran if they overthrow the state.
It is just
it's everything in there.
It's unbelievable, right? The state that their founding myth is they're making the desert bloom. Meanwhile, they are destroying every single standing building in Gaza, causing rubble and dust and other particles to, fill up that landmass for decades to come. And then on the US side, right, we also just have marketing for the most part. One thing that jumped out at me from your film is, you're asking Nancy Pelosi, how can we talk about facing down climate change when we're not even willing to consider the impact that the US military is having? And she basically is just like, well, actually, did you know that the US military considers climate to be a major national security threat? Like, oh, okay, we're going to bomb the carbon out of the atmosphere. It's just total nonsense. And that at this point, even if there's the market-based solutions are basically nothing, it's almost better than just slapping the term green onto a problem and calling it solved.
Oh my God, you make such a good point about just Israel, the vegan boots, just all that shit. They're like, no, we don't kill animals for our leather. It's like, what? Did you see speaking of market-based solutions, guys, don't worry about climate change anymore, because I just saw 2 Silicon Valley startups that are going to release carbon dioxide balloons on the top of a mountain to now you can pay. You guys want to pay? You pay into this, and there'll be a fucking guy in Monterey or whatever going to the top of a mountain releasing balloons that are trying to, darken the sun. So this is where we're at.
Yeah, all of the eco-engineering and terraforming stuff, it's all just the same tech bullshit that is used to move VC dollars and doesn't act like no one actually has a plan for how that's going to functionally remove carbon from the atmosphere. There's just like big question marks on the whiteboard.
Yeah, it's like totally unregulated. It's like, what is this going to do to pollution? Like how, like the fallout of just releasing these balloons. Is anyone monitoring this? It's like the fact that we've somehow let Elon Musk blow up these Starlink satellites every 2 to 3 years to replace them. And it's just, are we even going to be able to fly out of space in the next 10 years because of all this trash that's accumulating?
And I think it really dovetails with the project of colonialism too, because we also hear this from the Israelis in other forms as well, right? They're talking about what they're going to do to depopulate Gaza, and they're talking about terraforming entire land masses to ethnically cleanse Palestinians too. And it just goes to show that the entire modus operandi of these colonial powers is to live in some fantasy world where all the consequences of their actions don't exist. And it seems like that same kind of destructive drive is motivating genocidal war, but it's also motivating the approach to climate, where there's just kind of a perpetual deferment of any consequences and operating just with this naked bloodlust.
100%. And you look at how it's all formulated. Just the origin of the US military. First, the expansion was to just protect the extraction of fur and mining. The initial fur industry almost drove all these animals out of extinction because we just wanted to ship all these stupid hats back to Europe. And then all the deforestation and all the logging, and it was all basically about coal. And so the fossil fuel infrastructure started with the extraction of coal and the maintenance of these coal mining stops around the world. And then it turned to oil. And so basically it just kept necessitating the need to grow the military to get the resources. And then you needed to justify having that big military in order to have these stations all over the world. And so now you see that self-fulfilling prophecy, like you just clearly stated, the justification to continue to get Venezuela's oil, for example, the most stark, blatant example of colonialism today. It's just to justify powering this massive military empire.
One of the portions of the film that I found most fascinating was the focus on the Arctic as the next frontier for fossil fuel-based geopolitics. That's something that I just hadn't really thought much about. Can you tell us a bit what you learned about how US military and political planners are anticipating or even already participating in conflict with China and Russia over these supermassive offshore oil reserves in the Arctic and the shipping lanes that are potentially opening up as the glaciers recede?
Yeah, it's so interesting because we do think of the Arctic as this, huge last untapped wilderness, as it should be. I mean, why would we try to colonize the Arctic? It's like, let's just leave it alone, especially because global warming impacts things twice as fast because of where it's located geographically. And so, you have the Arctic indigenous people, which are the most toxified people on the planet. They're the most impacted by the military because the military has always set up shop in the Arctic to confront China. I mean, look at basically every single major global conflict. The US has continued to build not only on these island chains in the Pacific, but also the Arctic. And so every couple generations, you'll have this massive dumping and resurface of this toxifying where the indigenous people are used as just a sacrifice zone. In late years, as global warming has intensified, and as you've even seen the Biden administration opening up Arctic wildlife drilling as well, and now Trump's just opened the complete fucking floodgate for Arctic drilling, the Army has concurrently been releasing documents and quietly planning their domination and superiority over the Arctic. It's very laid bare, and that's another thing that's really interesting about this documentary is that everything is from the military themselves. Every single piece of data and fact that you see, like a lot of people have asked me, why didn't you include the Nord Stream pipeline in it? And I'm like, I didn't need to. This is airtight. This is the military saying all of this themselves. Everything's quantified from them. And so you look at these Arctic dominance documents where they're saying, we want the Arctic. The Arctic's melting twice as fast as the rest of the world. This is opening up new opportunities for us. New opportunities for what? Natural resource extraction. You guys, I went to one of these panels. You see it in the movie yourself. It's kind of like Israelis. It's this weird Machiavellian hive mind where they're all saying the quiet part out loud as if you are living in an alternate reality. They are literally saying, we are dominating the Arctic, which is great. So that's an opportunity for corporations to come and experiment. Come to the Arctic as if it's their fucking playground, right? As if these top brass of the military are like, we own this place, right? You come, you experiment, you do whatever the hell you want. It's up to us. And these people are just nodding along as if, wait, I'm sorry, once the Arctic goes, isn't that like the whole thing? Isn't that like where we're already on code red here? Like once the Arctic goes, where are we at? Once the glaciers melt, I think we're not really talking about like, hey, corporations, you guys having fun over there? Like, what did you learn exploiting and taking all the fucking coal and oil and gas from the Arctic? I mean, it is absolutely surreal that you're talking to these people and they're saying this stuff. In the year 2025, as the world is on fire, they're literally saying, we own this place. Come do whatever the hell you want. Let's take it all. Let's take it all.
Something that I was really, I brought this up to you when at the screening itself, but I was really shocked at how unprepared they were for any sort of questioning about this. There's two varieties of angry responses that I see. A lot of this you see from Israelis as well, where they're obviously angry that they're being questioned about something, but they have predetermined responses that they've run through and that they're frustrated to have to go through again, but they'll still do it. They're trained to do that. But here, they're really not anticipating that anyone will question them about any aspect of this process. They're expecting people, like you told me, they're expecting people from like Defense One or Stars and Stripes to do this. I mean, why do you think they don't ever anticipate that anyone will ask about this, ever?
I think it goes back to your first question. Why aren't people asking about this? Why did it take 30 years for someone to confront these people at COP when militarism has been excluded from the jump? Why? It's really accessible. The military on one hand is very secretive and very ubiquitous and they're censorious. But on the other hand, they're also dumb. And I didn't submit headshots. I just submitted my name applying to get into all these places like the RIMPAC warships, like these defense contractor conferences, and they did not check. They let me in. And so I think that it really is a testament to how much access journalism runs the game, how much people just don't even think to question status quoism and the nature of empire. I mean, this is the most obvious thing in the world. It's right in front of our faces, and it's largely ignored, rarely acknowledged, especially from Americans, that we live in a global military empire that's subjugating the masses and holding the world hostage at the barrel of a nuclear gun. And people are just so unaware and ignorant of this fact. And I think it just speaks to the extension of that propaganda, which is the corporate media media. It serves the state. And in order to even get into these positions of power in these media institutions, you go along to get along. It's like usually you're a Zionist, usually you're an imperialist, and usually you believe in these things. It's not like you're self-censoring every day and being like, oh God. It's that you really are a true believer. You're an empire baby. And so naturally you serve these people in Washington. I lived there. I lived there for 4 years. It was hell. I saw exactly how it works. I went and tried to question, like I saw Medea Benjamin every day at the halls of Congress. I was like, oh God, these people are really accessible. I'm going to go try to question these people themselves. I asked one question to Rand Paul out of turn while he was walking down the halls of Congress. The Capitol Police tried to arrest me and charge me with stalking and harassment. And I was accredited journalist at RT. And I remember like going in this dark, shadowy room in the halls of Congress with the press corps. And they were just like, don't do this. We worked for years to get this access. You need to go through this, and this.
Okay. But also,
it's like,
this,
what
this
the hell
fucking
is going
access
on?
journalism. This is the thing. They've been trying to concoct this, I don't know what you call it, this atmosphere in which they have comfort and they have access that they presume to be long-term.
Mm-hmm.
But now these access journalists at the Pentagon,
Right,
who for years have virtually never questioned anything regarding Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, any number of conflicts, now they're being flushed out by the Pentagon for even more obsequious oafs. These freaks who take photos of themselves in front of the Pentagon logo, asking Pete Hegseth about his day. Like, it didn't work. All of these people still hate you.
Yeah.
And they view you as an insect. It doesn't work out for any of these people, even if they support these imperial projects.
Abby, something that you document well in this film is the impact that these bases in the United States are having on the surrounding communities. I mean, I'm thinking particular about the Hunters Point Naval Base in San Francisco. I grew up in Oakland, and this naval base was used as a testing ground. I believe is used as a testing ground for nuclear weapons, and has been measured to have a very high level of airborne plutonium, which is radioactive. And the Navy has basically just denied any responsibility for this and has totally refused to clean it up. Now, Hunters Point is a lower income neighborhood with mostly Black and Latino residents. Do you view what the military is doing there and elsewhere around the country as a form of environmental racism?
Oh, 100%. I mean, you look at where all of like the most deregulated, poisoned zones are, the Superfund sites, it's all in the most poor, low-income communities. And of course, naturally, we're talking about Native people, Black, Latino people, very poor working class folk, because they don't have the power to fight the military. The only way the military is ever held accountable is by lawsuits. That was another big part of the documentary, is this kind of relentless attempt to try to sue the military into doing the right thing, and how that's the only way that they'll rectify anything. But yeah, I mean, Hunters Point is a really great example, and they tried to cover it up for decades. They hired some firm that committed what is called the largest case of eco-fraud in the nation's history. Like, that's how far they're willing to go to cover it up so they won't be held accountable, because they really rule the EPA, they rule the government. But I want to just touch upon the bases here in the United States and abroad, because I think we know with the deregulation, the complete impunity the military has to go anywhere around the world and operate with this kind of unregulated nature. Obviously, we're talking about unquantifiable destruction of indigenous land across these war-torn landscapes and base expansion projects. The legacy of contamination from Agent Orange and nuclear radiation is unquantifiable and continues to kill people daily. But for the last several decades, that's just legacy contamination that I think a lot of people say, oh yeah, well, that's before the military knew that these things were really poisonous and toxic. But then you look at somewhere like Camp Lejeune, where yes, sure, maybe they didn't know at the beginning how toxic the toxic waste that they were dumping straight into the straight into the water wells would be to unborn babies in utero. But surely they found out really soon, and then they continued to lie and cover it up for years and years and years to their own service members. Now, that again could be looked at as something that was in the past, right? Oh, well, it's an old story. They've learned and they're better now. No. Right now, they are using PFAS. They are using VOCs, volatile organic compounds, and PFAS. I don't even know what the fuck PFAS is broken down to. It's like poly, whatever. These are forever chemicals that the military uses more than any other institution to clean aircraft carriers. They just dump this firefighting foam into the ground every day, cleaning out these jet hangars and stuff. It's insanity what they are doing. And that poisons communities. You do not know how to clean this up. They try to burn this stuff. It's like, wait, this is firefighting foam. It's a retardant for flames, and you're trying to burn this shit in the atmosphere. And then on top of that, just the maintenance of the arsenal, the maintenance of this military arsenal. When you have 600 Boeing Pegasuses, more than 3 times the rest of the world combined, that's like basically a mobile flying gas station, right? When you are maintaining this arsenal of jets and tanks that is multiple times size the rest of the world's arsenal combined, with chemicals to contain them to be mission ready, where they're ready to go, you are dumping an untold amount of toxic chemicals into the ground every single day. So just the amount of maintenance and the toxic dumping to maintain this military arsenal is, again, poisoning us every single day, poisoning every single surrounding community of these bases, and they have no idea.
One thing that makes this even more striking, right, is the financing aspect of it that you also demonstrate in the film, right? So, we're talking about a Pentagon budget of north of $1 trillion. And you show in this film the military literally just detonating their extra munitions out in the field so that they can maintain their same level of financing, so they can keep the money spigot open. Also, as you're naming, they're funding all of this litigation to defend themselves against communities who are seeking to have them held accountable in any way to the environmental destruction that they're doing. And yet they refuse to spend a dime cleaning up these toxic messes. It's just shocking to see these things next to each other, the level of waste and the level of destruction. And I think it demonstrates the irredeemability of the military as an institution, and that they are just on a base level committed to this kind of violence and destruction.
100%. I mean, it is literally an institution of death and destruction. That is what they thrive on. It is its own capitalist enterprise, and that is exactly how it operates. And you see the example of that $1 million minute, which literally within 1 minute, it is probably more than $1 million worth of ammunition, bombs, C4 explosives. I mean, basically everything that you could think of, bullets, gasoline, they just blow it up because they're bored. And they do it all the time because they don't want to carry anything back to base because they won't get the same amount allotted the next round. And I think that really speaks volumes to the collective insanity that has come to define this institution that somehow rules the entire planet.
This notion of firing munitions just willy-nilly, not caring about who gets killed or what environment gets destroyed. I was reminded of this psychopath that used to be in Congress, Duncan Hunter. He was a Republican from California who was an artillery officer in Fallujah, which is Iraq you speak about in the film to a large extent. He made this comment on a podcast called Zero Blog 30 back in 2019. Quote, "I was an artillery officer and we fired hundreds of rounds into Fallujah, killed probably hundreds of civilians, probably killed women and children if there were any left in the city when we invaded. So, do I get judged too?" Which is in reference to Edward Gallagher, the war criminal who was accused of shooting at civilians. I want to get into Fallujah as kind of this case study of all of the evils that the U.S. military does in Iraq. But before that, I just want to frame this. What is a depleted uranium round? And why does the U.S. military use it so extensively?
Well, depleted uranium, I'm sure your audience already knows that it's a radioactive component that they dip bullets in order to basically just make them stronger so they can cut through metal. I mean, that's the simplest explanation. But the problem is that depleted uranium has a shelf life of what? Forgive me if I'm wrong, but it's like 1 million years minimum. It's like
it's uranium.
It's uranium.
Like it's one of the most like when I heard about the existence of this, it just shocked me. I want to say they were trying to give it to Ukrainian soldiers, the U.S. Army, trying to give it to Ukrainian soldiers to use against Russia, even though it had already poisoned U.S. soldiers who had been deployed into the Balkans. Again, not caring who they kill, even their own proxies, they are fully willing to be disposable through this fight as long as they are attacking subalterns, whoever that gets to be.
Before we talk about the depleted uranium and Fallujah thing, it's just so interesting that you're talking about this complete lack of awareness of how we live in like a globalized environment, like that we all share the environment. It's like, do these insane genocidal maniac capitalist imperialist fucking pigs not understand that they breathe this air and drink this water, that there's only so much you can purify out of? That's what it kills me, because I don't really understand that madness and that tunnel vision of like, as long as you just get yours now and perhaps for your children, and then they'll have a seed vault, like, but then there's nothing left after that. So it is so insane. It's like, you think that would just by sheer selfishness of preserving their genes, like they would want their grandchildren to have something habitable left.
What we've been describing this whole conversation, right, is that the determinant logics are the logics of capital and the logics of empire. And the actual impact of emissions, of activities that are detrimental to the climate, do not factor in. That is not in the profit calculus in the short term. And it is not an interest of empire to preserve the actual existence of the world, right? I mean, it should be, but it's just not. And so that's how you get the scenario where, you know, all of these power brokers that you're talking to and that you're questioning in the film, the only way that they can conceive of this is, where's the money? Where's the money to be made about this? And how does this factor into our grand civilizational fight with the East? Right. And so it's like, that's why you get the market-based solutions of, okay, well, actually, there's so much guap to be made in green retrofitting, in blah, 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 in public-private partnerships. And so that's how we can get people to be green, is get them to chase the money. Well, at the end of the day, that only works so long as the checks are cut. And the bottom line of the world is not the bottom line of private corporations, as we know. And then on the other side, it seems like the way that US power brokers are thinking about climate change is just about grand geopolitical competition with China, right? How can we box the Chinese out of having access to the necessary supply lines for green minerals, for the technology necessary for the future? How can we cut off their access to fossil fuels, not to reduce emissions, but to put them in a chokehold? And as always, when the US military is in the driver's seat in terms of imperial policy, what is that going to look like? It's going to look like warfare. And if competition with China is the main determining logic, no one is thinking about emissions. No one is thinking about impact. And I think that's part of what is so powerful about what you've been able to demonstrate. And getting to Seamus's question as well, it's like, why are they so dumbfounded by this? Because the only questions they are told to think about, the only structuring logics here are those of capital and empire. And the environment is just not a bottom line in either of those calculations.
Yeah, and it's so interesting. Like, as you're talking, I'm thinking about just the counterintuitive nature of just empire in general. I mean, the waning of U.S. hegemony as a result of the endless war on terror. I mean, the waning of support for Zionism because of just their unrelenting genocide. Like, they can't help themselves but go full genocidal. And it's kind of like, when you're a hammer, every problem is a nail. There's no other creative ingenuity outside of problem solving other than war, militarism, death, and destruction. It's like you just can't see outside of what you've created. And I think that's exactly, like, look at the pink tide in Latin America. It's like all of the belligerence and the arrogance and the revival of the Monroe Doctrine has made it so you have Gustavo Petro, you have these people who are actually willing to stand up instead of these lapdogs that you could have placated through just perpetual neoliberal rule. So it is fascinating how they will destroy themselves very rapidly because they can't help themselves, because there's no way out under global capitalism. And to your point about the Iraq War, Seamus, I mean, the Iraq War has been such a backdrop, I feel like, for everyone, especially in our generation that, you know, I know you're younger than me, much younger than me, but I mean...
I need to defend myself on one thing. I do remember the John Kerry election.
Oh, good.
All right? It was something that I remember.
Horrible, like, beginning, like, formation of your foundational memory. It was like, John, I went on a swing state trip for him. It's a very hard thing to talk about. Very traumatic. I went to Yuma, Arizona, and it was awful. I put everything in that, Seamus. Put it all.
No, look, everybody's got to come from somewhere. It's fine. No, but the Iraq War, I mean, I know what you're saying. I wrote this in the Drift this month. All of the rhetoric with Gaza, with Venezuela, with all these other countries that we're targeting, which seems to change every single week. all of the rhetorical language that we use has its origins in how we tried to sell Iraq and how we tried to sell our continued occupation of Arab lands. And even when we're talking about the sudden focus about stealing Syria's oil or about stealing Venezuela's oil, all of that still has to go with Iraq, with all of these criticisms of saying that this war was for oil. No, this war should be for oil, they started saying. And it seems like what's interested me is that you talk about Gaza. The production cycle of this film, I was told, was fairly long. It was like 5 years. So you do touch on Gaza, but it's not the major focus of the film. Can you go into more detail about the scale of the environmental destruction that Israel has wrought upon the Strip specifically?
I mean, it's hard to talk about that without talking about the scope and scale of the documentary and how we tried to integrate Gaza throughout because everything is so interconnected. It's hard to obviously ignore, as we were editing this film, it's like we have a part just about emissions. You can't talk about emissions from the US military without accounting for what's happened in Gaza, but you can't really just focus on that because it's so unquantifiable and it is global. For example, the fact that Israelis were saying at the beginning they wanted to drop a nuke, but they didn't want the radioactive blowback. It's too fucking late for that, man. If they don't think that they're going to die from cancer and from toxic fallout from the relentless bombing and, over the past 2 years of what they have done, they are in for a very dark, depressing reality coming because that is going to affect all of them. What are they, a couple miles away?
No. They want to bulldoze people's civilizations. Yeah. They want to believe that they can be in Starbucks and in theme parks and all of these gorgeous settlements, but literally and figuratively, they are being rotted from all of these things that they are doing. No, it's maddening.
No, it is. And, as we talked about the emissions, just the intentional, calculated destruction of that much concrete infrastructure, the intensive construction of rebuilding with concrete. It is the most energy intensive material and it produces among the most emissions, right? So when you're just talking about that, looking at Gaza and looking at how much concrete infrastructure there was and how little there is now and how much they're just being like, okay, we're just going to rebuild it. We're just going to rebuild it. Like you just said, they did this on purpose. It was intentional destruction of every fucking building there so they could rebuild it in their image. And we know, Anthony Aguilar, that Gaza Humanitarian Whistleblower Foundation whistleblower, he was saying that when he was there, he saw the Boston Consulting Group blueprints from 2020 about what Gaza was going to look like once they redid it. It's like this has been in the works for so long. And a lot of people don't know, they think of Gaza as just like a desert. Gaza was actually a really rich, biodiverse, like very fertile wetland. Actually, it had a very interesting geographic nature that was different than the rest of Palestine. Of course, being by the sea. And so the intentional destruction just over the last 20 years of the desalination plants, of the water systems, the fact that the largest source of disease before 2023 was the lack of potable water in Gaza because of the intentional targeting of all of the water plants. And the electricity grids, of course. And so the inability to even just have a normal functioning life. So after October 7th, we all see what they did to the infrastructure, but also the intentional firebombing and destruction of all of the olive trees. They had, I think, 1.1 million olive trees, and they destroyed over 1 million. And then, of course, all the farmland. Basically making it so you can't survive off the land, intentionally so. You look at World War I, there's still dead zones from small munitions back then. So you tell me what Gaza's going to look like in 100 years.
You're talking about intention and how this was all kind of in the cards for years. And I'll be candid and say that the first time I came across your work was in the street interviews that you did with Israelis a number of years ago, long before October 7th, when, you're asking them these pretty normal questions and they start spewing this totally insane Hitlerite drivel about Palestinians and about Arabs in general. And as I recall, there's this one clip where an Israeli says something in response to a question of yours, says something to the effect of, I just think the only solution is to carpet bomb all of them. And when you ask, well, do you mean Gaza or the West Bank or like, what are you talking about? He kind of just shrugs.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's just them. And I think one thing this demonstrates is what you're naming, which is that there has been this genocidal intent for a long time, which kind of as an aside, but as someone who follows the legal debates about this stuff, I find incredibly frustrating that you have people coming out and saying, oh, well, the bar for genocide is so high. And the reason for that is because the intent standard is so high. And you really have to prove genocidal intent. Meanwhile, we just have years and years and years of documented footage of Israelis coming out and saying, I want to genocide them. I want to exterminate all of them, right? That's one thing that it demonstrates. But from a climate perspective, it also indicates the collective death drive that we've been talking about that permeates both the Israeli culture, but also the US culture. And I think it just raises this question of, do the military, the political leadership, the stakeholders, we talk about their operative logics, but do they not see where this is going? Or is this not their problem because in 50 years, they'll all be dead?
Yeah, and then you have to rule out like the religious fanatics too. It's like, I think that a lot of people like the Mike Huckabees and stuff, they like this. Like this is all the sign. This is all the prophecy coming true. I mean, I know people
everything in the earth is made for the exploitation of man.
Totally.
That biblical notion.
Totally. Like I have friends that are ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, and they're just like, no, they're like everyone's like happy. Like this is all finally all coming to fruition. Everything they've been told. So once you filter those people out, it is quite fascinating. I mean, to your point about the absurd mainstream discourse, is this or is it not genocide, as we have watched a Holocaust be live streamed in 4K for 2+ years on our devices. I mean, I always knew it was genocidal. It's like Zionism clearly is a genocidal policy, and all it takes is just going and speaking to Israelis themselves, and it's just like this stupid thing where you're just like, oh, have you proved genocidal intent or not? It's like, I don't know, have you just listened to them? Like, how many pages and pages do you need of quotes and policy and saying that they're going to cut off the water 40 years ago? I mean, Jesus Christ, how much do you need? It's just like this continuous abstraction of something that we're just all watching and unable to stop. But I've always called it a slow drip genocide, and now it's just genocide on steroids. And it's disgusting that people are still trying to pretend like it's not. But yeah, the ecocide, the ecological destruction and devastation. It's a great question. How could you do this knowing that you're poisoning yourselves? It's that digging your own grave that Antonio Guterres says every year, like at these stupid climate treaties. He's just like, we're digging our own graves. And then like you just saw COP30 just happen where they bulldozed some of the Amazonian rainforest to get the delegates in. They spent more carbon flying everyone there than they did to try to cap it with some sort of final treaty. And so at the end of the day, the final paper didn't even mention fossil fuels. There was more fossil fuels delegates there than there were any other country, like there is every year. But this one was just even more cartoonish because of how dire things are. You don't even have Trump showing up anymore. So now it's just, hopefully we'll have a just transition soon. And of course, it's all going to be voluntary. None of this is binding. Good luck. We'll see you next year.
I wanted to ask about, I'm being reminded as you're talking about the COP30, COP28 happened in fucking Dubai. And a place that is so poorly run environmentally that they do not have a unified sewer system for the city. And they just dump waste inside of the basements that need to be trucked out by
Wait, are you joking?
Masses of trucks. What?
Are you joking? That's the way.
I'm not joking at all. There are photos of these lines of human waste that are just being trucked out of
Do
the
they
city.
just have like slaves carting them? Like who's even?
I don't think these are Arabs doing these jobs, no. But also I'm thinking about, because I follow Emirati newspapers very closely, and a big thing that they keep talking about is the idea that by 2070 they'll make Dubai green. Like they're going to plant tons of, Dylan, I see your face. Like they're planting all kinds of grass, lots of palm trees, making it into a space that like...
Palm trees require so much water.
I mean, global warming is going to ravage the Gulf. But if they make it green, that'll like reduce the surface temperature. It's all, I don't even know what you call hogwash, if you want to use an archaic term like that. But I wanted to connect that to the similarly idiotic proposals that are now coming out with this redoing, this revitalization of the Gaza Riviera plan, the Board of Peace. Because I saw the concept art that they were doing for these new rebuilt versions. Ugh. God, even to say that, of Gaza City, of Khan Yunis, of Rafah, where these are AI generated for the most part. But they show these grandiose cities, but they've replanted the trees that the Israelis tore up. They're making all of these new green spaces, all of these new parks, but simultaneously with that, they're talking about AI-powered everything. smart cities, cryptocurrencies, digital wallets that will determine Palestinian land rights.
Oh my God.
All of this stuff, which is based on tech nonsense. I don't know if there's like a definitive answer to this, but how sustainable is this kind of fanciful enterprise where we're constantly talking about how the environment's going to get fixed, but with no, like you're saying, not even talking about fossil fuels anymore. All of this stuff will be able to exist simultaneously with each other, this utopia. How long can this greenwashing go on for?
Yeah, the compartmentalization of all these like Silicon Valley solutions, quote unquote. I mean, so surreal and dystopian, and I'm at a loss of words to describe this new reality. It's like Idiocracy and A Brave New World combined somehow, but with like tech overlords who think that they're emperors of the universe. I think to your point, Seamus, this new reality of the data centers and the AI integration with the military industrial complex and the perpetuation and bipartisan consensus of Silicon Valley integrating their infrastructure for fascism and totalitarianism, and how that's really just streamlined all of the coalescing of these entities that it seems like over the last couple years. I mean, the fact that, you had the Google CEO protesting the Muslim ban and virtue signaling back in 2016. And now you have them all lined up behind Trump during the inauguration. You saw Mark Zuckerberg trying to attempt to do the fake news thing and procure those censorship tools. And then, of course, he immediately ceded ground to Trump and the left, of course, ultimately the victims of censorship, as they always are. So there's this bipartisan consensus of tech with the data centers that are now going to be driving and sucking up all of the clean water, half the electricity grid. If you've noticed, Trump is now talking in every single speech. He's just dabbling how we're going to double the electricity grid for AI. When are we voting on that? Like, can you imagine if the internet first started and they just casually like, we're going to double the electricity grid to power the internet? People be like, hold on, we need like a democratic vote or some sort of consensus of this new technology and how fast we're going to just all be a part of this and give up all of our natural resources for it. And the fact that you're already having people say it's going to collapse, we're going to be the ones to bail out the AI industry. But the data centers, I think, are really the new terrifying thing on the horizon. But again, it can be the biggest tent possible that we can build around because it's in these rural areas. A lot of these rural areas are going to be hit and hit hard with all the resources being sucked dry. All of these cancer clusters that we're already seeing erupt just in the last couple of years. Miscarriages, birth defects, and cancer clusters over these data centers. So that needs to be where we generate our movements, I think, and start organizing against them locally with this international lens, because it's happening and it's happening fast. And this movie was the Biden administration. That's the status quo. That's the Democratic Party. That's death.
I'm glad that you're moving us towards questions of political strategy, because that's where I wanted to go next. And I think we've spent a great deal of time here criticizing the ruling class for its total failure to be able to respond adequately to climate change, in part because of its commitment to capitalism and to empire. And one thing that I'm often thinking about and that we try to surface in this show is the question of what it would mean to have a leftist or an anti-imperialist political program. You're mentioning the domestic side of it, but also in terms of foreign policy. By that, I mean something that moves beyond critique into actually advocating for a set of policies or changes that we want to see. And I think in general, and perhaps in part for lack of an alternative, what we're left with is often something like Obamaism, right? Mm-hmm. Global empire, but smart. Global empire, but efficient, etc. And thinking about the question with an environmental lens makes it clear that what we need really probably is to be talking about a managed withdrawal of empire. And I was thinking this in the film when you cover US presence in Okinawa and all of the environmental harm and the local anger that sparked. That really what the left political program needs with respect to foreign policy is a plan to just bring it all offline, right? When I say that, I mean closing all of the bases and bringing everyone and everything back home. And as simple as that is or sounds, that doesn't really make it into mainstream political messaging, at least as we see in terms of like any left-wing electoral project in the United States. People aren't really saying that or advocating for it. And I'm just curious, like, does that resonate for you as a political horizon or something that we should be aspiring towards?
Oh, absolutely. I think the more that this is burgeoning in the consciousness of Americans, I think that this is going to be the issue, especially as the younger generation, Gen Z and stuff. I mean, they're burdened with debt. They're seeing the climate catastrophe on the horizon, and they're seeing fascism. And they see how all of these things connect. They've been watching a genocide for 2 years. And so I think they've been radicalized by the lack of action from Kamala and Biden. They've been radicalized by the status quoism and the perpetuation of this death spiral. And so they're ready to act and they're ready to agitate. And I've never had more revolutionary optimism than I have on this tour, this small tour, to get out finally of my isolated space and actually meet the masses, meet multi-generational movements from every avenue, every place in the most red states possible, coming out in droves saying, we are starving for this information. We are motivated. We are ready to go. We want a habitable future. We want a fighting chance. And it's incredible. I've never seen anything like it. I've been in the streets for 20 years, man. I was out during the Iraq War, and I never have seen anything like this, where Americans are motivated and moved by their brothers and sisters in the Congo and Sudan and Palestine. They understand how these things are happening. They get it. And that's the failure of neoliberalism. That's the failure of Obama for not holding criminals to account, for letting torturers run free. So it's actually an amazing moment. As dystopian as it is, there is a moment for us to seize. And I've never felt that way before. I honestly feel it now. People are ready, and we have the masses on our side, and we have the numbers on our side. Things are so stark and dire, and that's exactly why people are realizing it's existential, it's in or out. It's not about just caring about this issue or that issue. It's everything. It's everything. And I've met people, over the course of my career, other parents who are just like, oh yeah, that's really special. When I had a kid, I had to get out of the movement, just, self-preservation. I'm like, are you insane? When you have a child, you have no choice. So it's time. People all over the world, they are ready for this message and they're ready to act on it. And that this movie is just one tool in the arsenal to do it. I mean, I do think a general strike, stopping capital, let's stop the parasitic madness at the knees. So it's recapturing unions. I mean, this is what the Democratic Party is so good at. They've captured all of the movements and they've atomized and sold it back to us and marketed it. And so again, like identity politics to the extreme, but we're waking up and getting out of that. But to your point, yeah, there's a huge detachment from even people like AOC and Bernie Sanders, who are supposed to represent the left of the left, the Democratic Socialists. You have people like Zoran, who, even though I really am excited about his victory, and I think it speaks volumes to where people are at, he's not good on Venezuela and Cuba. I mean, we do need a strong line of anti-imperialism. We need a strong line that is not kowtowing to this kind of NGO narrative where we're dictating what other people should do to stand up to leaders that we are funding the opposition for around the world. Let people decide. First and foremost, what can we do? We can do something about our government. What is our government doing? Funding a proxy war in Ukraine, subsidizing a genocide, arming an empire. Let's start there, right? Why did I know about Japanese whaling when I was 13? Why was I writing letters to the Japanese government about whaling when I didn't know that my government was committing a Holocaust against marine mammals every year with these training exercises? Why is that? Because they don't want us to know. So it is a huge embarrassment that you do see people like Jeremy Corbyn, Andrew Feinstein. They are militantly anti-imperialist. Yanis Varoufakis, all these people in other countries, they have already incorporated anti-imperialism as a central component of the left. We're still catching up to that for some reason, but I think we've caught up. And I think that the vast majority of Americans, especially young people, need anti-imperialism as the undercurrent of their political movement. And it's happening, and it's time. And I don't think sadly, it's not reflected in any leader right now. So again, I think we shouldn't look in a hero. Look at what happened with Bernie Sanders. We need to look to us and the agency that we have to organize ourselves. So what is happening in our community? Is there a base? Is there a Lockheed Martin's factory? Is there a data center? That's where we need to start, and approaching everyone with humility and empathy. And I'm not talking about a MAGA base. I'm not talking about fascists who want the left dead. I'm talking about liberals, people who care about the environment, people who don't understand the scope of this issue, reaching out to those people. Half the country doesn't even vote because they don't think anything speaks to them. Where are they? So I'm sick of this notion. We need to reach out to the Trump white working class, this romanticized notion of people because they might critique Israel. That's great. But right now we have a movement to build and a planet to take back. And I want to start there.
Thank you, Abby, for speaking with us today.
Thank you so much, Abby.
Thanks so much. You guys rock.